Welcome to Bruce Hurwitz Presents Meet the Experts. I'm your host, Bruce Hurwitz of Hurwitz Strategic Staffing. You can find us on the web at hsstaffing.com. I hope you'll consider us for all your staffing, career counseling, and professional writing needs. Momentarily, I will be joined by Howard Crosby. We will be discussing natural resource investments. Meet the Experts is sponsored by P&K CPAs. P&K is a full-service accounting firm. They provide accounting and consulting and services to businesses ranging from startups to small and mid-cap companies to nonprofits, as well as high-net-worth individuals. Contact them today for a free consultation at info@pk-cpas.com or call them at 973-882-8810. They will be happy to be of service. Howard, welcome to the show.
Bruce, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It is my pleasure, sir. Please take a moment or two and introduce yourself to our viewers.
Well, Bruce, I've worked in the natural resources space my whole career, going back well over 40 years now. Out of college, I started working for a company called United Nuclear, which back in the day, we were a New York Stock Exchange listed company in the uranium space. And I traveled around the world. We had a big project in Australia. I spent many months in Australia working on a uranium project. And from there, my whole career has followed the trajectory of operating as an officer, director, founder of various companies in various natural resource enterprises, ranging from gold, uranium, copper to oil and gas. And so I've had a lot of experience over the years. I could go through a long history of things, but certainly was involved in, we acquired a gold mine from Newmont Mining back in 2002 that was called Mesquite, which they were in a shutdown mode, and we revitalized it, drilled out new reserves, later sold it to a company called New Gold. It's now back in full operation under the flagship of Equinox down in Southern California, doing about 175,000 ounces of gold a year. My partner and I bought a company from Coeur d'Alene Mines that was the second largest primary silver mine in U.S. history. They were in a mine out mode back in 2006, and up in the Silver Valley, we bought the property for $15 million. We spent a whole bunch of money redeveloping reserves, brought it back into full operation. It's been producing 2.5 million ounces of silver ever since, and continues to do that under a new name, which is now called Americas Silver. And then, of course, we'd been big players in the oil and gas space in the early part of the 2000s with a company called Cadence Resources. And we're still involved, active in both precious metals, copper, and I'm very active as the CEO of a new oil and gas company that we started 2.5 years ago called LGX Energy. So there isn't much in the space of natural resources that I haven't been involved in at some point over the last 35 to 40 years.
Now, if somebody wants to invest in natural resources, do you go online or call one of the companies that advertises that they'll sell you gold coins? Do you buy shares of oil futures, natural gas futures?
All of the above is possible. I think for people that are interested in gold, I mean, obviously you need to have a base foundation of physical gold, which means you're buying bullion coins. I've never felt like it was a great idea to try and invest in numismatic coins and guess which ones are going to be the most popular. What you really want is physical gold, which is either Krugerrands or maple leafs, something like that. You're basically buying them for the bullion price of gold, whatever that might be on a given day. Of course, gold doesn't pay interest, but gold is the only asset that isn't someone else's liability. Gold is a pure monetary asset.
Mm-hmm.
So
on this show, by the way, we say maple leaf before Krugerrand.
Okay, well,
because I grew up in Canada, so
yeah, well, there you go. But I'm agnostic as to either one. They're both right. 1 ounce of physical gold.
An ounce is an ounce. But you see these commercials, and they're saying 99.9% pure silver? Or, how do you know that's legit?
Well, that's why I'm saying, if you're going to invest in physical gold or physical silver, you might as well buy it from buy something that's either issued by the Canadian government or the South African government, or the US government produces a gold coin as well, but they charge a premium for it that I don't think is justified.
Okay.
Just because it has the stamp of the Lady of Liberty on it doesn't mean it's worth an extra $30 or whatever they charge for it. You're looking for the physical gold. Then beyond that, of course, there's investments in the markets, and with the markets you have your big name companies like Newmont and Barrick that are big gold producers, or if you're looking at copper, for instance, which has become very topical as the world tries to electrify and go more toward electrification, which is involved both in transportation and all other aspects of life. Copper becomes a very critical thing, and you can invest in the big copper producers like Freeport or BHP or Rio Tinto, or you can look at smaller copper producers and their shares as well. Of course, you can always trade metals futures in the commodities markets. That's a little bit of a dicier game, because you not only have to be right on the direction of the commodity, but you've got to be right on the timing. I've held some gold coins that I bought at a very low price a long time ago, and there was never any chance that the contract was going to expire on them because I have them in my possession. Right. And of course, with investing in the stock market, I mean, you have a wide variety of options there. Obviously, since you're from Canada, Canada seems to be the birthplace of most of the exploration companies that are involved in natural resources in the mining space, for sure. Here in America, we have a lot more companies that are involved in oil and gas exploration and development.
Sure.
And very few companies here that are pure mining plays as such, other than some of the big names, right?
Now that's because of environmental factors.
Well, I'm not sure so much it's that. I mean, there are environmental challenges now for mining companies almost no matter where you go in the world. Some jurisdictions are better than others, and within the United States, some jurisdictions are better than others. For instance, if you're investing in a company that has a project in Idaho on patented ground, it's as good a place to invest as any place in the world, because Idaho doesn't have any regulatory regime affecting mining properties on patented claims. You don't even need a permit. Nevada's been considered a good jurisdiction for mining, one of the best jurisdictions in the world. And I live in California, which there are parts of California that have a justifiably very bad rap for development of natural resources. But other parts of California are quite good, because in California, what you find is that the counties have the county commissioners have an enormous amount of authority when it comes to permitting projects. For example, Equinox just permitted a big gold mine in San Bernardino County last year, which is up and operating. There's oil and gas development around Bakersfield that proceeds without much problem. And yet the second largest province in U.S. history for oil and gas production, after the Permian Basin in West Texas, everybody knows about the Permian, right? But the second largest primary basin of oil and gas production in U.S. history is the Los Angeles Basin. Los Angeles basically floats on a sea of oil. And back in the 20s and 30s, there was enormous oil production in Los Angeles. Today, there is still some oil production going on in Los Angeles. In fact, the La Brea tar pits, which everybody's familiar with, are nothing but an oil seep where oil came to the surface in downtown LA. But no new development is occurring in Los Angeles because of permitting difficulties, and it's just been stopped.
What about precious metals? We're hearing so much about them because they're needed for the batteries for electric vehicles.
Okay.
And the story goes, the Chinese went into Africa, bought the mines, bought good relations with the locals.
Well, yes, the battery metals are interesting. The primary battery metals, of course, are lithium, nickel, and cobalt.
Mhm.
which for today's batteries in your Tesla today are absolutely required. The United States, as a matter of course, produces zero cobalt in this country and very little nickel. There's quite a bit of nickel production in Canada, as you know, and there's a lot of nickel produced in New Caledonia, which is basically an island in the South Pacific that sits on a mountain of nickel. There's also a lot of nickel production out of Russia and South Africa, but over 60% of the world's cobalt comes from the Congo. And I think very few Tesla drivers or electric vehicle drivers realize that in driving an electric vehicle, they are supporting child labor in the Congo in appalling conditions because there
And
is
when
no
you tell them
cobalt.
that, they are not happy.
That is usually distressing to them, but it is a fact. And there is some cobalt production in Russia as well, very limited amount in Canada. So you know, the production of the need for battery metals will be, among other things, the limiting factor that will affect the transition or the attempted transition to electric vehicles, because there simply will not be enough of the critical metals available to meet the projections that are forecast by certain agencies. The idea that you're going to move to an entirely electric fleet by sometime by the end of the first half of this century is impossible. The metals simply cannot be there. And interestingly, you know, environmentally, there's a real argument that electric vehicles are no more environmentally beneficial than an efficient gasoline engine or a diesel-powered engine. For instance, if you look at the life cycle of an electric vehicle, and you have to take into account all of the energy and the carbon that was emitted in producing the materials to manufacture the batteries in the first place. Then you have to look at the environmental cost of disposing of the battery. I mean, for instance, I often tell people, you know, the battery in your Tesla is exactly the same as the gas tank in my car. Because if I don't put gas in the gas tank, it's not going anywhere. If you don't charge those batteries with electricity that was generated somewhere else, you're not going anywhere. The batteries don't produce any energy. They're simply a carrier of energy, exactly the same as my gas tank. So I often tell people, you know, they're proud because they say, I drive an EV and it's environmentally friendly. Well, where do you live? Well, I live in New Jersey. Oh, you're driving a coal-fired car then, because the electricity to produce to charge your battery came from a coal-fired power plant. Or, you know, I live in Chicago. Well, you're driving a nuclear-powered car then, because that electricity came from a nuclear power plant. The batteries in the Tesla don't produce any power at all.
No.
And not only that, the batteries in your electric car are so heavy that they cause the tires to wear out 2 to 3 times faster. So you have the environmental degradation of the disposal of tires. You know, it's never a straight line discussion when you try to figure out, you know, how this whole energy balance thing works. I used to live in this. You'll find this story interesting, Bruce. I used to live in Walla Walla County in southeastern Washington State, and just south of the Canadian border by one state. And the largest wind farm in the United States is in Walla Walla County. It's a 600 megawatt wind farm on the ridges that overlook the Columbia Gorge. Okay, so there's a lot of wind there, and the wind blows and whatever. And so a few years ago, after the plant was up and running, I had lunch one day with the project manager for the owner of the plant. Oh, by the way, the wind farm there in southeastern Washington is owned by Florida Power and Light. Now, if you look at the map of the United States, you can't get much further in the continental United States from Florida than southeastern Washington.
No.
But anyway, I had lunch with the project manager and we got to talking, and I said, so how's the wind project working out for you? He said, well, it's all right. I said, well, that's not exactly a ringing endorsement. Well, he said, we have some problems. I said, for instance, well, of course, you know, they're kind of a maintenance nightmare. The wind turbines are a maintenance nightmare. We got a lot of maintenance issues. And he said, of course, we kill a lot of birds. They chop up a lot of birds. And he said he said, you know, we're a utility. We have to deliver electricity to our customers at peak load demand. And typically when there's peak demand, the wind isn't blowing. So we have to keep a power plant on standby, ready to kick in at peak load if the wind isn't blowing. And I said, well, you guys are smart. You knew all of that ahead of time. Oh yeah, we knew that. I said, well, you know, I'm just curious on why the $600 million investment in the wind farm clear up here in the Pacific Northwest. And he said, well, we needed the green credits. I said, well, explain that to me. He said, well, by building the wind farm, we got enough green credits that we were able to build a 1,500 megawatt coal-fired power plant in Ocala, Florida. So the calculation was we spend 600 million on wind up here. We get some electricity from it when the wind blows. We don't have to burn fuel. But what we really needed was a new coal-fired plant, and this allowed us to build it.
For Florida or for Washington?
For Florida.
For Florida.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that just, you know, if you look at them, they just don't make any sense.
No. Oil.
Yes.
One of the things that fascinates me is when you have people otherwise intelligent getting up and saying that we should do away with fossil fuels.
Okay.
I can remember reading that 50% of oil goes for energy and 50% goes for manufacturing of things that do not produce any energy. So if there was no oil, we'd have no plastic. What else would we lose?
Okay, well, let's just dissect this a little bit because that's a very great question. So oil is the most important commodity in the world for modern civilization as we know it. Oil is also the engine that has been able to lift millions of people out of grinding poverty around the world. Oil was a $2.1 trillion commodity last year in the world. 2.1 trillion. That's more than double the volume of all metal elements combined. So yes, oil is used for transportation fuels, gasoline, diesel fuel, aviation fuel, kerosene, whatever. It's also used in over 6,000 products that are part of our everyday life, without which modern civilization as we know it could not exist. These glasses I'm wearing, the shirt that I'm wearing, the computer that I'm talking on, that microphone you're using, all of them are derived from oil products, along with thousands of other products that you use every day, including your cell phone and everything else. So oil is critical in that sense. But even more importantly, let's talk about the role of fossil fuels in agriculture. In 1900, 130 years ago, 94% of the workforce in the United States was engaged in subsistence farming. Today, less than 2% of our workforce works as farmers. And yet, that 2% produces vastly greater quantities of agricultural output than the 94% did 130 years ago. Why is that? One reason: fossil fuels. Diesel to power the tractors and the combines, the machinery that make modern farming possible. And even more importantly, natural gas-based fertilizer, which is absolutely essential to feeding the planet. Without natural gas-based fertilizer and farm equipment, at least half of the 8 billion people on this planet would starve. So if we stop producing oil and gas, we're condemning over half the world's population to mass starvation. And that is a fact.
We've been focused on natural resources that all have one thing in common. They are underground. there was a time where the natural resource that was most in demand was a tree, hundreds of years.
Yes.
Are there any natural resources above ground today that are
Well,
worth
I,
investing
you
in?
know, yeah, I mean, I've seen, the bumper stickers and whatever, but basically everything in existence, every product in existence that we know of was either grown by a farmer or mined or drilled for by a natural resource explorer. Every single thing.
Mhm.
There is nothing else. I mean, we can't manufacture anything out of air. We can't produce anything out of the clouds. The rain falls naturally, right? So everything comes from the earth one way or another. Um, and of course, there's still tremendous need for um, agricultural products, including trees, which are used for all kinds of things. But trees, of course, are a renewable resource.
Absolutely. I have one final question for you, and I'm going to put up your contact information. Is there anything that I did not ask you that you wish I had asked you? And if I had asked you, what would you have said?
Oh boy, that's a very good question. I think that it's such an intense topic, and it's so important for humanity that we somehow reverse this trend of condemning everybody that's actually producing necessary raw materials, including minerals and oil and gas that and nuclear for that matter. Um, all of these things are essential for humanity to live in a way that does not put us back into the Stone Age. So um, I think what you're doing in terms of educating people in natural resource investments is a very critical thing, Bruce, I have to say.
Well, thank you. I'm not doing anything. You're doing it. And I want to thank you. I can only describe this interview as brilliant, and that's 100% to your credit, not mine.
Well, I appreciate that. And if any of your listeners, they're happy to reach out to me by email. I think that you've put my email up there. And so
It
I'll be
is.
happy to do what I can to share information.
Howard, I thank you profusely.
Thank you, Bruce. Appreciate it.
This was excellent. I'm Bruce Hurwitz. Thank you for watching. And as always, please stay focused on success.